North of the city, on the way to Bear Mountain, is a lovely-looking place called the Letchworth Village Rehabilitation Center. Set among the hills and woods of suburban Rockland County, a passerby could easily mistake the place for a country club or a college campus. But the early morning mist gave the place an eerie feeling, like a set from a horror movie. And once inside, that feeling became suddenly appropriate.
Long before Letchworth Village had a sinister connotation attached to its name, it was seen as a progressive institution that cared for and supported patients in reaching both self-efficacy and their full potential. It was also recognized for the advancements in the field of early vaccination research. However, this would all be nearly forgotten about and seemingly irrelevant once a young journalist broke the story of what was really happening behind the closed doors at Letchworth Village. That young journalist was none other than Geraldo Rivera, and this real-life horror story is what made him so famous.
The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible. There was one attendant for perhaps 50 severely and profoundly retarded children, and the children, lying on the floor naked and smeared with their own feces, they were making a pitiful sound, a kind of mournful wail that it's impossible for me to forget. This is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled? It smelled of filth, it smelled of disease, and it smelled of death.
In 1972, Geraldo Rivera took millions of TV viewers inside Letchworth Village as part of his unflinching, award-winning exposé, Willowbrook, The Last Great Disgrace. Although the exposé largely focused on the conditions inside of Willowbrook State School, another institution with a similar situation, some of the content was also from inside Letchworth Village. In Geraldo's disturbing video, he captures the reality of life for the patients of Letchworth Village. It shows handicapped children lying naked on the floor, covered in their own feces, making unforgettable moaning noises. It also shows adults wedged together, all crammed up in small rooms with no one to care for them. There's even obvious pain in the voice of late Bronx Congressman Mario Biaggi as he tells Geraldo during the Letchworth tour, "This appears to be the worst possible conditions I've ever seen in my life."
Many of our citizens who are subjected to what appears to be the worst possible conditions I've ever seen in my life. I've visited penal institutions all over the country. I've visited hospitals all over the country. I've visited the worst brigs in the military. Nothing's like it. I've never seen anything like it.
About 25% of the funding for Letchworth Village comes from the federal government, and one of the requirements for continued eligibility is that there be 80 square feet of space per patient. Here they get only 35 square feet.
Geraldo's expose documentary is just as disturbing to watch now than it was 50 years ago. Although it may be hard to imagine now, Letchworth Village started with humble beginnings as an inpatient residential institution located in the small, quaint town of Thiells, New York. Construction of Letchworth Village began in 1910, and it opened its doors in 1911, making the majority of the buildings still standing on the campus over 110 years old. It was built and designed for the physically and mentally disabled persons of all ages, from newborn to the elderly. The campus of Letchworth Village consists of over 130 different buildings and measures at approximately 2,000 acres, solidifying its name as an actual village and giving truth to its one-time motto of "There's an acre for every patient." Letchworth Village was named after William Pryor Letchworth, who sought reform in the early treatment and care for the insane, epileptic, and poor children. The sprawling complex was originally created as a home for the segregation of the epileptic and feeble-minded. The town of Thiells, New York was chosen specifically because of its location, as it was pretty much just a stone's throw from the scenic Hudson River. It was only 40 miles north of the populous New York City, and it offered plenty of breathtaking landscape with rolling hills and vast farmland where the mentally ill could find both peace and serenity while in a beautiful and welcoming atmosphere. So we just made our way inside of the medical building at Letchworth. Letchworth Hospital, one of my favorite locations. It's a very popular location because of all the buildings and the history of what happened here with the abuse of the children. and the tragic stories that unfolded here back in the day. Here's the morgue. Autopsy table at Letchworth. And you know the history and the abuse that happened here. You can't help but to think about like the kids that might have been on this table and what this table and what these walls have seen. Look how grimy it is and how old school it is. All stainless steel. It's got the drain holes in it. This is all the medical cabinetry for the morgue. And then this was actually the body trays, but it's collapsed. It's actually like caved in on itself. So this was actually the morgue body trays. And you can kind of see them back there. This is actually one of them right there. There's the handle for the one of them right there. There's the handle. To pull it out, pull the body out of the morgue. I think it was 4 drawers. You can see the fan right there. From its opening in 1911 through the heydays of the 1920s, the able bodies tended to the farms, they worked in small shops, there was a hospital, several administration buildings, a rec building, a power plant, and several places of worship where the patients could both work and attend services. Most of the other buildings were patient dormitories that were mostly single-story and designed and subdivided to house up to 70 residents per building. The dormitory buildings were required to be at least 200 feet from the other buildings, and each one had to have its own outdoor playground. So much better in the winter, bro. In the summer, this is like flooded and shit.
Yeah,
horrible.
this is all ice.
Autoclaves for sterilization. That's what all this is. At Letchworth. You can see inside there. There's a big autoclave. And this was the lab. Letchworth Village began to gain a lot of attention as it separated itself from the normal standards of the usual imposing asylum buildings that had previously been institutional models. So for all the aforementioned reasons, Letchworth Village was highly sought after, and it eventually became overcrowded, with the majority of patients being young children. Completely contrary to its early ideals, the overcrowding led to insufficient funds and shortages in hospital staffing, which then trickled down into the all too familiar cases of both patient neglect and abuse. What may have been a simple design of patients learning how to become more self-sufficient resulted in more of an institution where the families would send their mentally ill children upriver and they could seemingly be forgotten about, almost as if they were never part of their original biological family.
This is the maintenance area. You can see just everything is still left in these cabinets. Stuff has been here for almost 50 years. This is just all flooded and frozen. It's actually really cool to see it like this.
So here's the fireboard for Letchworth. This was the fireboard, you could tell. But what's cool is that this is the maintenance room. And like you would see at a prison, you have all the tools where they would go so that the kids that were living here, because yes, they were living here, wouldn't steal them, and they would notice when something was missing. So that is why you have where the tools go and why they're painted like that. So they could tell if something was missing, so one of the kids could take a screwdriver and assault or hurt one of the nurses or one of the orderlies here at Letchworth. I mean, these tools can do some damage. Look at them. Hammers and hacksaws and pry bars and crowbars and wrenches and drills. Nitrous. This is the nitrous for the medical. And oxygen. This is how they would play like music over the speakers. And play the radio throughout the system here at Letchworth. So this is the controls for that. So you got the pager and stuff like that. Decibels. Here's the radio. Pretty cool. X-rays. X-ray control, it looks like. X-troll. So they could get some X-rays. X-ray room here. Another little lab. Look at that, January 1993. This place closed in 1996. Look at this grimy sink. So it was probably for X-rays for patients that were in this room. So you can see this is where the beds would probably be lined up. Although fault may lie more in the hands of the parents and the families, Letchworth staff did little to help matters, as they would often isolate the children from their loved ones and would reassure the families that their children were in the best of care. In 1950, despite rumors of both overcrowding and patient mistreatment, Letchworth still had a decent reputation amongst health professionals. The facility was even upfront about its intention to use the patients as guinea pigs in clinical trials of vaccinations. The most famous case was the experimental polio vaccine, which was successfully tested on an 8-year-old boy in 1950. Controlled drugs. Look at that. Subject. Controlled drugs. Testing was subsequently carried out in more children, and the success of the vaccine at Letchworth Village ushered in the widespread use that we still see today. This most certainly helped contribute to why Letchworth Village was allowed to stay open and why they also received hardly any backlash for the experimentation on children. Geraldo Rivera's eye-opening 1972 documentary expose showed the residents at Letchworth Village, many of them children, living in awful, dirty, and overcrowded conditions with a lack of clothing, bathing, and attention to their most basic survival and needs. The facilities were incredibly understaffed, and there was little or no actual schooling, training, or even simple activities to help keep the residents occupied, as they once claimed. Although the documentary gained national attention and public outcry, it did little for the immediate needs of those still living at Letchworth Village. This is the main floor. This is the main elevators here. You can see that print. The institution still remained inadequately funded and mismanaged for several more years. By the 1980s, investigations into the state-operated facilities began, and Letchworth Village was just one of many that surfaced with proof of residents being found unclothed, unbathed, and neglected. In addition to the rampant abuse among the institution's residents, the staff also suffered abuse at the hands of co-workers, which included incidents of rape. Both Geraldo Rivera and the public saw the overcrowding and patient neglect as a direct result of inadequate funding and the ignorant attitude toward the disabled in the wider society. Here's another lab up here on the first floor. Suture set, catheters, stomach tubes, suture removal. Pharmacist, no. And this would be a nurse's station here. Look at that, little booklets and stuff still here. This is an allergy thing, it says. And then this is this would be a day room here, like where the kids would chill. See the drinking fountain over there in the corner. So the nurses could keep an eye on the kids in the day room from the nurses station here. Another nurses station here. So you would have the day room across from the nurses station again. This one's a little darker. Another day room. It's like an old pager system there, still sitting on the nurses station. So here would be a room, patient room, 253. And you can see nothing really left. You can see where the beds would be, where those lights are. But look how creepy this is. It's like a smiling sun. And those tattered curtains there. So each light would be where the bed would be. And then here's their personal belongings for the closets here. They can put their stuff in. This one's still got his name on it. Look at that. Alvarez. Still got hangers hanging too. That's wild. Look at these creepy curtains too. So here's Letchworth, see LDVC, that's Letchworth Village Developmental Center. So that's what LVDC stands for, and these are outing requests for the patients. And look at, it's got what cottage they're in, name, diet, meds, other pertinent information. Outing requests. That's pretty cool from Letchworth. Murals of Sesame Street going on here for the kids. There's Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. Back over here we got Pluto. I almost said Goofy. Pluto. These bathrooms. And the toilets had these yellow curtains. So you get some privacy anyways. Here's some vines growing in from the outside. And then you have some child cartoons for wallpaper here. Look at that, that's cool. Super old. The potential of individual patients was obviously far from being realized. This confronting investigative report helped eventually lead to far-reaching and much-needed reform of disability services and treatment throughout the entire country. Many of the country's residential institutions were widely reformed, but many were also shuttered. The old methods of segregating patients and the disabled were changed to including them into society and bringing a normalization to them. With the now widespread notoriety of Letchworth Village, the number of residents drastically and significantly decreased by the 1990s. It was officially closed down in 1996. The remaining patients were moved to more up-to-date modern facilities throughout the state where they could be better cared for. And many people who worked at Letchworth Village refused to speak of their experiences and to the ghastly first-hand accounts of what they had witnessed. When Letchworth Village permanently closed down in 1996, most of the buildings were just locked up and left to rot away. A few of the buildings were renovated into schools and such, but many of them still stand today, although barely. Many of the buildings have suffered from the years of neglect, having no maintenance, being exposed to the harsh elements, not to mention the trespassers, squatters, and vandals have also done little to help matters. As far as abandoned asylums go, Letchworth Village is fairly unique. Many other similar facilities are usually fenced in and heavily patrolled by security and police to keep out squatters, vandals, and curious urban explorers. Others have been demolished or have been repurposed. Letchworth Village, however, is essentially a park where it's actually maintained by the city where you can legally and freely stroll the grounds. It's very popular with dog walkers, and while you're not really supposed to go inside the structurally unsound buildings, there's really no one around to make sure that you don't. A rather interesting fact is that Letchworth Village seemed to follow this trajectory, from a notable facility for healing, to abusive human rights horror show, to the now haunting ruins that you see today.
So this is the whole drop ceiling collapse with the light fixtures and the insulation still all attached to it.
They even have the handrails still up for the handicapped children. So this is one of the washrooms where the kids would get washed and hosed down. This one's padded because I'm sure that some of the kids, they had to restrain them to clean them. I mean, news reports said that the kids were literally sitting in their own feces and vomit and everything like that. Look at the pillow. There's the controls. And then there's the hose.
This whole entire floor over here is ice. You can see all the windows are open. A lot of moisture got in here and then it froze. Goes all the way through that room. This is all ice.
Vegetation. So here's hydrotherapy at Letchworth. Look at this metal tub. Ground is very icy and slick. There's the workings of it. Faucets. I'm sure this was like so they could sit in something like a chair. Because many of the kids were developmentally disabled, couldn't walk, couldn't even kneel. So they probably had to restrain them and sit them in there. There's a seat over here, actually, it looks like. So they would take this seat and put it in there so you can pick it right up. So that seat is kind of like an attachment for that thing right there. Interesting. So these curtains also kind of hid you while you were getting your hydrotherapy. Look at the ice around it. Very slick. Stainless steel. Single person one. Save a life today. Give a pint of blood. New York Blood Services. So this is obviously a fridge for blood samples and stuff for this lab here.
Zane, this has a piece of tape on it that says 1986.
This is actually cool, because these are acoustic rooms for acoustics. So look at, I don't know what they would do with them, if they were like testing the kids' hearing. But yeah, so they would go in here and then they'd turn up like volume on them. You can see there's like speakers behind here. And then there's the window. And they'd shut this door. It's like soundproof. Interesting. There's another one over here. It's super weird. It's interesting that they had acoustics room for sound. So this is the acoustics room, where they would do either sound testing for the kids or to try to see if their sensitivity to sound. I'm sure many of them didn't speak, couldn't talk, so they had to do stuff like that to figure out what's up with them and how they can help and how they can best treat them. Special clinic calendar. It's got like the doctors' names and stuff that they would come for. Wow. And what building and stuff. As we wrap up the video, we sure hope that you all learned something and never forget the unimaginable and inhumane treatment of the lost souls at not just Letchworth Village, but throughout the world. We must be grateful that we have made vast and necessary improvements and changes in the treatment of our mentally and physically challenged individuals. They are not a number, they are not a statistic, they are not forgotten, and most importantly, they are people just like you and me. Thank you so much for watching, and for more photos, make sure you check out AbandonedCentral.com. And don't forget to subscribe to Abandoned Central on YouTube to get all of the latest videos. The support is always appreciated, friends.